Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, November 30th. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Matt Hoffman in for Maya Trabulsi. Tonight, thousands of academic workers at University of California campuses are still striking for better pay. Now, with finals approaching, some UC San Diego students are worried that it could affect their grades. Here's KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado.
It's the last week of instruction at UC San Diego, and as students hurried off to class, all over campus you'll also find groups of UC academic workers on strike. Typically, they'd be inside classrooms and labs doing a multitude of tasks, among them giving instructions, running discussions, grading papers, and preparing students for next week's finals. Fourth-year student Kayla Guzman says she doesn't really know how her grades will be affected by the strike because there hasn't been much clarity.
It is kind of scary. It sucks that we're so late in the quarter and everything is up in the air, but I'm just going to keep going to class and trying to do the best that I can despite everything.
We wondered, how's class been without them?
Not really great. Of course, we would love to have our TAs in class with us so that we can, ask questions and just get feedback on our assignments. It definitely is a better learning process when they are there.
Second-year student Annie Meyer says her education is suffering without the academic workers.
We miss the TAs so much. They run like the UCs. I mean, we are not functioning correctly without them.
Both students are supportive of the academic workers and say they should get paid more for the amount of work they do.
I do hope that they get, the wages that they deserve, but I guess in terms of the grading, it really just shows how much work they put into everything.
We need them back, but they need to be paid more, and I don't blame them.
Urayan Tandon, a computer lab researcher at UC San Diego, is among the 48,000 academic workers on strike across the UC system. He says he feels for the students who have worked hard for their grades.
I think I definitely understand the concern that some students are feeling, but at the same time, I also understand that me and a lot of my colleagues are basically living in poverty, and the university at any point has the ability to end that.
He also finds some hope in the tentative agreement the UC reached with postdoctoral scholars and researchers, because for those 12,000 workers, the strike could end as early as the end of the week or as soon as they sign their contracts.
Now that that's out of the way, we can negotiate every day and see some movement on our own contracts.
The UC says that negotiations are ongoing and they look forward to settling the contracts as soon as possible. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
The U.S. House of Representatives has voted to avoid a freight rail strike that could cripple the nation's shipping industry. The bill now goes to the Senate, which will have to work fast before a tentative strike date of December 9th. Mike Valerio has the latest.
The president made it pretty clear the repercussions, the ramifications for the country and for workers across the country if we don't get this done, if there is a strike.
The House of Representatives approved legislation in a two-part vote Wednesday to block more than 100,000 rail workers from walking off the job next week. The bill is now in the hands of senators who need to pass it before a strike set for December 9th. For months, there's been a stalemate between the workers' unions and the railroads reporting record profits last year, with one strike averted in September after a tentative agreement was reached.
Once the members looked at it, some of the unions ratified it. That said, this is enough. But a lot of union members felt, particularly in the wake of the pandemic, that paid sick leave was something that they had to have.
President Joe Biden asked top leaders in Congress to get involved this week after previously being reluctant to step into the fight. But ultimately, he decided the economic upheaval a strike would cause couldn't be ignored. Business groups fear a freight rail strike would lead to widespread shortages of food and goods, to prices spiking and commuter train interruptions. One economic group estimates it would cost the U.S. economy $1 billion in just the first week. Unions say walking off the job is a last resort, but one they're willing to take so rail workers can get their demands met.
They work really hard, very dangerous jobs. Many of them work outside, exposed to the elements, to chemicals, musculoskeletal injury, and they need paid sick leave.
In Los Angeles, Mike Valerio, KPBS News.
For years, solving homelessness has been one of San Diego's biggest civic challenges. KPBS reporter John Carroll tells us about a major conference underway that's generating high hopes for new solutions.
So be a part of the conversation because you're a part of the solution.
Tamara Kohler is hoping for lots of productive conversations to take place during this two-day, first-of-its-kind conference, Solutions for San Diego.
The problem is so large that we need everyone understanding how we're doing it, why we're doing it, the support of electeds, the support of the programs. This brings everybody together centrally to hear the message clearly.
Dozens of people from all over the country working to solve homelessness in their communities are joining with hundreds of folks here working toward that same goal. But despite major efforts from the city and county, the problem is actually getting worse. Kohler says for every 10 people who get help to get off the street, another 13 people fall into homelessness.
If you look at the coastal cities in the United States, that's where there is disproportionate homelessness.
Greg Colburn is the keynote speaker for this conference for a very good reason. He wrote the book. In Homelessness is a Housing Problem, Colburn lays out the case that among the many factors that contribute to people experiencing homelessness, a lack of housing is at the top of the list.
Homelessness thrives when housing isn't available.
Like in Colburn's hometown of Seattle, housing in San Diego is expensive. But he says from what he's seen so far, this conference has huge potential to make big strides toward solutions.
I walked into the session this morning and was blown away when I saw how full that ballroom was. And so I'm really, really impressed that the group here has pulled that many people together for this event.
What's working, what's not working, and what should we stop doing? Let's think about new innovative ways. Let's figure it out.
This conference winds up tomorrow, and at that point, the hundreds of locals attending it will go back to their jobs with new ideas and perhaps a new determination to finally solve San Diego's longest-term, seemingly most unsolvable problem. From downtown, John Carroll, KPBS News.
9 sailors were injured in a fire aboard USS Abraham Lincoln. The Navy says the aircraft carrier was about 30 miles off the Southern California coast when this fire broke out yesterday morning. It was extinguished by the crew, and all the injured sailors were treated on board the ship. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Mexico is deploying hundreds of National Guard troops in Tijuana to combat violent crime. But data shows that crime hasn't decreased. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis explores the impact of Tijuana's growing military presence.
You've probably seen this meme before, or at least a variation of it. It's of a man and a woman walking down the street holding hands. The man gawks at another woman passing by, and his partner just stares at him, mouth wide open in utter shock. There's a version of the meme circulating on social media in Tijuana. In it, the man is represented by thousands of National Guard troops who've been deployed in Baja California to tackle the spiking homicide rate. His girlfriend, Tijuana residents who are supposed to be protected by the National Guard. And the other woman, well, she represents Tijuana flea markets. Maria Cortez makes her living in the city's flea markets. She sells secondhand clothes, and she laughed when I asked her to explain the meme to me. Cortez says that the National Guard troops come from parts of Mexico where American goods like Nikes and Levi's are hard to come by. So they like to shop around in the flea markets while they're in Tijuana.
Y cuando vienen a Tijuana entran a sobre ruedas y miran los tenis Nike, viene la ropa de marca, ven cosas que allá donde vienen ellos no hay aquí, pues voltean y andan viendo qué compran.
And while the troops shop, Cortez and others say that neighborhoods in Tijuana remain besieged by violence. There were more than 1,900 homicides last year in Tijuana. At first, residents were happy that the federal government was finally taking action.
Cuando recién llegaron, fíjate que sí intimidaba, ¿no? Había como esa presencia, dices, ay, qué padre, ya nos sentimos más protegidos, ya a ver.
But there's already been more than 1,700 murders in Tijuana so far this year, on track to surpass last year's total. The National Guard troops stationed in Tijuana did not respond to a request for comment. This isn't the first time that Mexico has turned to the military to fight crime. Cecilia Farfán Méndez is a researcher at UC San Diego. She traces today's efforts back to 2006.
So the argument that was made about in 2006 was that because there was corruption in civilian law enforcement institutions, we needed to deploy the armed forces in a way that they had not been involved before, until, these other institutions, the civilian institutions, were developing up and corruption was rooted out of them. So it was always meant to be a temporary solution.
Now, nearly 2 decades later, city and state police forces are still considered corrupt and ill-equipped to tackle cartel-level violence. In September, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador doubled down on the militarization strategy. He passed a law that formally made the federal police force part of the military. So far, the data show that this hasn't worked.
Despite these deployments, we don't see security conditions improving in Mexico.
Maria Cortez doesn't need data to know that her neighborhood is still a dangerous place. She recently gave me a tour. She pointed out the house where the local meth dealer lives and the playground that people use to shoot up heroin. They operate in the open, and Cortez says that the National Guard still does nothing to stop them.
Claro que no, nada. Ellos no. Tienen miedo, yo creo.
Cortez says that the soldiers are either scared or they just don't want to bother. To make matters worse, soldiers in other parts of Mexico have been accused of human rights violations. Farfán Méndez says this is also something that isn't new.
What has been documented over the years, especially by human rights activists, is that unfortunately these deployments tend to really erode human rights.
Teresa Martinez is a researcher for the think tank México Evalúa. She has spent years conducting fieldwork in neighborhoods like the one where Maria Cortez lives. She says that the current conditions are so bad that people are actually willing to sacrifice some of their own civil rights for more protection.
My rights, like for citizens, my rights has been violated every single minute, every single day by the organized crime or any other criminal. So I don't care about the human rights.
But she says that's only acceptable if the armed forces brought here to protect them actually accomplish their mission. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
San Diego police are going to start enforcing the city's street vending law in some areas this weekend. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer tells us why that is and what's coming next.
Since June, San Diego has had a law against street vending in high-traffic areas, like Balboa Park and the Gaslamp Quarter, but enforcement has been a mixed bag depending on where you are. Park rangers and code enforcement officers had been in charge of enforcement, but the Gaslamp Quarter Association's Michael Trimble says it hasn't worked in his district, so the police got involved 2 weeks ago.
The police have been making communication and making contact with each of these vendors, letting them know that there's no vending in the neighborhood.
Trimble says many of the dozens of Gaslamp street vendors have numerous health and safety violations on their carts that have led to some catching on fire. Felipe Rocha is a local San Diegan and street vendor at the Broadway Pier. He says he's purposely avoided the gas lamp.
Porque es mucha gente que no es de aquí, gente que viene de Los Ángeles y te meten miedo. Te dicen que te van a cobrar un cierto % de plaza por tú vender tu comida, tus hot dogs.
This weekend, police officers will start handing out citations to illegal street vendors in the gas lamp.
Enforcement means, whether it be tickets, citations, or whatnot, it really depends on what the police feel is acceptable at the moment.
Outside of the gas lamp, enforcement will soon include the beaches and other coastal areas like the pier, once an amended version of the vendor law takes effect. Once that happens, Rocha says he's not sure of what to do. He says he might look for a job at a restaurant in order to take care of his family.
Pues ir a un lugar, o sea, tratar de buscar otro trabajo, ¿no? Lo que te digo, yo tengo a mi familia que mantenerla. Y si me quitan el día de mañana, ¿qué voy a hacer?
The enforcement expansion to coastal areas is expected to take effect early next year. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
The volcanic eruption in Hawaii has interrupted a key long-running scientific record of airborne carbon dioxide. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
Lava flows from one of the world's largest volcanoes have cut off access to a research observatory that's recorded carbon dioxide levels in the air for more than 60 years. Those measurements record steadily rising CO2 levels, a scientific record widely known as the Keeling curve. That record was started by Scripps Institution of Oceanography's Charles Keeling, who died in 2005, and is now maintained by his son, Ralph Keeling. The station isn't expected to be operating anytime soon.
They still have to build they have to let lava cool, they have to build a new road over it, they have to put new power poles over it. That's months in any case.
Keeling says he's looking for a nearby location that's suitable to take measurements until the observatory is back online. He says Mauna Loa is a special spot.
There's Mauna Kea, there's Mauna Loa, there's some other volcanoes on Maui that are getting up pretty high. But I mean, it's just those volcanoes are the only thing sticking up in the atmosphere in such a remote spot. So it's really an amazing location and unique and really valuable for atmospheric work.
Keeling says a temporary site would have to be upwind of the erupting volcano because volcanoes can be a major source of carbon dioxide emissions. The Keeling curve is widely regarded as a warning sign about global warming. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
A federal grant will help ensure San Diego's health department has the staffing and technology to continue combating the pandemic and other infectious diseases. Yesterday, the CDC announced $3 billion in funding. It's meant to bolster the nation's public health infrastructure. San Diego County will receive $33 million over the next 5 years. That money allows the public health department to keep on 60 positions that were added during the pandemic.
That's significant for us, and we're grateful. Every little bit helps. There's also other infectious diseases that continue to flare up that we are responding to. And so this funding really sustains that surge staffing that we need in order to be nimble and responsive.
County health officials applied for this money back in August. It will also help with much needed technology upgrades, including those inside of the public health laboratory. In the aftermath of COVID, this fall semester has created many challenges as schools return to full-time learning on campus. That includes the state's new transitional kindergarten program. It's going to take 4 years to implement, but as KPBS education reporter MG Perez shows us, one local school district is already way ahead.
We're going to peel our bananas, and Gordo Gorilla says, "Gah, gah."
There is lots of learning happening in Mrs. Ray's transitional kindergarten class, with lessons in mastering letters, a new one every week. These 4-year-olds and some of their 5-year-old classmates are students at Creekside Early Learning Center in the Alpine Union School District. Their teacher and teacher aides guide them in how to be first-time learners.
Learn how to work in groups like this, learn how to sit and listen to a story, how to take turns and share and get along with others.
This fall, California schools started rolling out TK programs for 4-year-olds under a new state law that will take until 2026 to reach all of them. But Alpine Union has already been educating these young children for the past 20 years. And Mrs. Ray has been here since the beginning.
We are not the type that jumps on the bandwagon. We kind of create the bandwagon and everybody else jumps on board with us. So we've always been trendsetters in starting things.
In fact, Creekside Early Learning Center is the only school in San Diego County just for TK and kindergarten students. This fall, there are 250 students on campus.
Well, I like to do computers and cooking the best.
5-year-old Gwen is one of them. All the students here are also enrolled in a dual English-Spanish program.
What other words do you know? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Jeanette Kirby is Gwen's mother.
I didn't realize how lucky we were to also just have the TK program. I think it's an amazing foundation for kids to learn, not just academically, but socially as well.
The Alpine District is so advanced in its early childhood curriculum, with a complement of 15 certificated full-time teachers at Creekside alone. The The school will be ready to offer TK classes to 3-year-old children who turn 4 by next September 1st, 3 years before the state program.
I think we've learned over the last few years what people want most and what students need most is connection. Getting them in school early, building those foundational skills, those academic skills and social and emotional skills as well.
Gwen is already clear on what she wants to be when she grows up.
Everything.
And no one doubts her. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Looks like our cool weather is going to stay with us for the rest of the week, and we see some opportunities for a little bit of precipitation. As we take a look at our weather headlines, we have the deep marine layer, so that means a lot of clouds around, especially near the coast, and we will have some below average temperatures. The winds will be on the increase Thursday as a strong southwesterly flow develops as a front approaches, but it looks like the heaviest of the rain will stay to our north, so any precipitation here should be rather light. So for tonight, mostly cloudy skies, our low 51 degrees, and we'll see our temperatures dropping down into the 40s Escondido, El Cajon, Borrego Springs, and down to the 30s in Mount Laguna. Looking at tomorrow's forecast, well, we'll see plenty of clouds near the coast. Those clouds will break up a little bit during the afternoon, but temperatures will stay cool. Temperatures running a good 4 to 8 degrees below average for this time of year. Here's the way it looks on our future satellite and radar. Main area of rain coming down through central and northern California, and mountain snow here too. It's a weakening atmospheric river, and by the time it gets down to here, it's just going to be falling apart. So that's why we're not bullish on any heavy precipitation here. It'll stay north of Los Angeles, but north of here, we'll see some pretty good rain and heavy mountain snow. So here's a look at our forecast along the coast. Low clouds, a little drizzle with us on Thursday. Mostly cloudy skies Friday, perhaps a shower. And as we take you over the weekend, another system approaches Sunday, very weak, and another opportunity for showers later on Sunday. Inland areas, just a passing sprinkle Thursday, and then on Sunday, could see that shower later in the day. Into the mountains, it'll be rather breezy here and chilly. And then looking ahead to the next system Sunday, very weak, but we'll have some winds. And in the deserts, well, it stays dry here. And temperatures rising to the lower 70s. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
The holiday shopping season is off to a solid start despite inflation. New reports show Americans are spending in record numbers, but also that they're not feeling great about the economy. Jen Sullivan breaks it all down.
The holiday shopping season is in full swing, and while Americans are spending in record numbers, they're also not feeling great about the economy.
Many consumers are telling us that this is a really important time of year for them.
A new report from Adobe Analytics found online Black Friday sales in the U.S. set a new record, with sales reaching $9.12 billion. That's despite inflation, higher interest rates, and recession fears. National Retail Federation says despite all that, Americans are still eager to shop.
62% said that spending around the holidays is critical for them. It is a priority so that they can make these celebrations meaningful for themselves or their families.
Meanwhile, new data released Tuesday shows U.S. consumer confidence fell in November to a 4-month low, indicating Americans are feeling gloomy about the economy. And financial experts warn if you don't rein in your finances, you'll end up with too much holiday debt.
It's so easy to go overboard at the end of the year.
Latina money expert Janice Torres has these 3 tips. 1, if you haven't already, create a sinking fund and stick to that amount earmarked for holiday spending. 2, make a shopping list, trim it down, and decide who will get gifts from you this year.
So you're not just kind of shopping ad hoc and then realizing maybe I overspent, maybe I didn't need to buy all of these gifts.
And 3, use cash savings apps that allow you to make money while you're spending money.
These are apps that you can download that basically will give you points or cash back whenever you make a purchase online.
For today's Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, Congress takes the first step to avoid a massive railroad strike. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Fleetwood Mac's Christine McVie has died at the age of 79. The British-born singer, songwriter, and keyboard player was behind many of the band's hits, including Little Lies, Everywhere, and You Make Lovin' Fun. Her family says she passed away peacefully at a hospital today after a brief illness. Fleetwood Mac issued a statement saying that McVie was the best musician anyone could have in their band and the best friend anyone could have in their life. Here's a look at what we're working on in tomorrow for the KPBS newsroom. Mexico at the World Cup. NPR's Morning Edition tells us about the team's early exit from the tournament, something that hasn't happened since the 1970s. And KPBS Midday Edition has an interview with UCSD's Susan Shirk. It's about her new book on China as the country faces new protests by its citizens. Well, the votes are in, and it was a close one. San Diego's new electric mini street sweeper will be named Sweepy. The city says over 1,000 votes were cast in this month-long contest. The second place name was Tess. It stands for the electric street sweeper. It lost out to Sweepy by just 11 votes. Now, this naming contest was part of a campaign to raise awareness about the importance of street sweeping and for quality of life in neighborhoods and preventing ocean pollution. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.